Really critical area of legislation that we're working on is the definition of a geothermal conservation well. It's differentiating this from battery storage versus an earthen well, essentially. Really, it's, as you and I both know, a geothermal energy conservation well is used to store energy underground so it can be brought back up to generate the electricity when the grid may need it, or behind the meter use for if industry is using that. But it's a way to add flexible dispatchable power to the system, and it qualifies as energy storage, but it's not a battery.
Welcome to Geothermal Unleashed, where we will explore the cutting edge of geothermal energy. I'm Elizabeth Cambry from the Valorec New Energies team, and I'm here to help educate and document geothermal's rise in the global energy transition. Today, we're having a conversation with Jade, Gillespie, the Executive Director of the Texas Geothermal Energy Alliance, and we're going to get an update on the latest geothermal initiatives being discussed in this year's Texas legislative session. Jade, thank you for being here. Before we get into the main topics of our discussion, would you mind introducing yourself and share how you got involved in the geothermal energy space? And then additionally, can you tell us a bit about how you came to be a part of the Texas Geothermal Energy Alliance?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here, Elizabeth. I'm really excited to visit with you today. I'm Jade Gillespie. I'm the executive director to the Texas Geothermal Energy Alliance, and my journey to TXGEA is really interesting. I always knew I wanted to work in energy, and I never knew how I was going to get to energy, and I didn't know what energy even meant. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and from there I joined the Air Force whenever I was 18 years old and served for about 10 years. Once my time was done, I worked in logistics, and I enjoyed my service. It was a really great experience, but I knew I didn't quite like working in that field. So I decided to come back home to Texas, and I went to college at Texas Tech, studied political science, and then I spent 10 years working in government at different levels, campaigns, staffing members at the Texas House and in Congress. And I was ready to move on and try something different. And I decided to go work in finance and real estate. But I really missed working with the public and kind of serving constituents and understanding. I really know how government works and legislative process, and I was really open-minded to what was next for me, and I was really eager to see what that would look like. And I learned about an organization called the Conservative Energy Network, and they had an opportunity here in Texas that really got to work with clean energy as a whole, so wind, solar, battery storage at utility scale. And I thought that was an incredible opportunity because, look, there's energy. While I still got to stay true to myself with the conservative principles that I've always had professionally and politically. And from there, I've just taken off like a rocket. And I got to meet Matt Welch and Barry Snotherman and the TXGEA team. And it was just truly an organic fit for me to transition from the Conservative Energy Network into this new leadership role with the Texas Geothermal Energy Alliance as we started off our second session. And so it's started in December, and it's been a roller coaster, but a really fun one. I'm really excited to be a part of the team.
Love that. And I love that you were in the Air Force. I did ROTC Air Force when I was in college and went to officer training camp. That was pretty cool.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that about you. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. So, okay, for our listeners who may not be familiar with the Texas Geothermal Energy Alliance, can you explain a little bit about what the organization is all about?
Absolutely. So TXGEA for short, we are the lone trade association that represents geothermal energy production, producers, developers, innovators, consultants, the thinkers, the thought leaders, the industry at large within the Lone Star State. So we've got our national trade association, we've got our international trade association. But in 2023, we got started and we realized, wait, Texas is poised to lead the next energy revolution yet again with geothermal energy, but we need the frontier needs the trade association to help guide the way. And so that's when TXGEA got started, was in 2023. Texas is the hot spot, if you will, and it's the next geothermal energy frontier. And so we had to put the stake in the ground and get rolling.
Wonderful. Okay, so the Texas legislature is currently in session. And so before we dive into the current bills under review, could you highlight some of the initiatives that were achieved in the last session? And that was 2023, correct?
Yes. So that was the 88th legislative session. That was the inaugural legislative session for TexGEA. And that was just two guys and a very smart energy attorney. And so they really set the map up for TexGEA to be successful and really pave the way for geothermal energy to thrive in Texas. And so with that inaugural session, they achieved four really influential bills. First and foremost, they placed all the permitting and regulatory framework out of all the different agencies all into one, which is the Railroad Commission of Texas, which makes the most sense, right? So that helped to streamline permitting and it allows the flexibility of the industry to really grow since we're so close to oil and gas with the class 5, class 6 wells. And it just really allows the geothermal drilling and innovation to develop a little more organically and streamlines that permitting process. We also placed into statute the ability to adopt orphan and abandoned wells, which I think really will harness that innovative spirit that Texans really bring to the table. Texans on Texans, just developers and innovators. Most importantly, in the spirit of private property rights and always remembering that Texas likes to move at the speed of business, it was really critical that we clarified and placed into statute who's the surface right owner and who's the mineral right owner of that heap beneath your feet. So that was probably one of the most critical things that we passed last session. And then also, HB 5 was the big energy bill that was passed that would continue Chapter 313 tax abatements for base load power and including geothermal into that as a baseload power resource was really crucial for just the foresight of energy development for geothermal. That's Chapter 313 tax abatements for a very high level view allow school districts to receive tax incentives for developers. And that's a very powerful tool for very rural parts of Texas that may not have big oil and gas developments underneath them, but they do have geothermal development opportunities. And so that way, the districts will really get to benefit from that. It's one of the most powerful development tools that we have in our toolkit down here.
Okay, so let's turn to the current bills that are in session. So which ones are the most important that are currently being reviewed?
Sure. So unfortunately, we have a really big cleanup bill, and it was just kind of a consequence of an action by placing everything under the Texas Railroad Commission. But we have a consequence of success, is what I like to call it, where unfortunately, when we put everything under the Railroad Commission, it did require a bond requirement, a pretty heavy bond requirement for um, our residential installers. And so that is filed, doing very well. It's identical companion bill in the House and Senate. It's doing great in both chambers. That's going to remove that requirement. And so our residential commercial installers will no longer need a big bond to take care of their businesses. So we're taking care of that. Another really critical area of legislation that we're working on is the definition of a geothermal conservation well. It's differentiating this from battery storage versus an earthen well, essentially. Um, Really, it's as you and I both know, a geothermal energy conservation well is used to store energy underground so it can be brought back up to generate the electricity when the grid may need it or behind the meter use for if industry is using that. But it's a way to add flexible dispatchable power to the system and it qualifies as energy storage, but it's not a battery. And so we're providing clarification to that. And it's just to help open the door for new projects and revenue streams in geothermal production and generation.
That's great. So let's look at some specific bills. So let's start
Okay.
with HB 3125, the GERA, is that how you say it, bill?
Yeah,
So this bill, it aims to establish a geothermal energy workforce education and training initiative through the Texas Workforce Commission. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that entails?
absolutely. Representative Guerra's workforce education and training bill is a really great strategic move. Representative Guerra brings so much foresight to the Texas House. Um, it lays down the groundwork for building out a geothermal workforce that we're going to need as this industry scales at rapid hyperspeed. And I really like that it's partnering between schools, companies, and it's going to create these training pipelines and connecting a workforce funding with real opportunities in the field. Trades are, it's the most powerful financial development tool that we have as Texans. And so for developers and operators, it really means that they're going to have access to a talent pool that lives locally that's going to make a great income and they're right there. And it's also going to mean that Texans will have a really sustainable income for the life of a project that's in their hometown, in their community. And it's not going to cause stress on these communities where their ecosystem's not going to be heavily influenced by a lot of out of town people because the workforce is developed organically and right there homegrown. But it's keeping Texas competitive as geothermal gains more traction and development.
Okay, that's really interesting. I want to ask another
Yeah.
question on this. So, how within the bill, like what is the framework that you have to put in place in order to make all of this come to fruition? Is it funding?
So there are some funding pieces to it. Right now, I actually need to go back and read the language because from what I understand, that there needs to be a little more change done to it with the representative because we've had some discussions behind it, but it's it's really creating partnerships with industry and education. So it's not necessarily the state using state dollars to fund it. It's incentivizing private industry to incentivize our Texas education systems, the higher level education system. So places like TSTC, our four-year universities and things like that are trade schools. But it's not state dollars necessarily funding it. It's incentivizing
Makes
the
sense.
private sector.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I like that. Okay, so what about, let's turn to the next bill.
Yeah.
So HB 3240 GERA bill, and this is a bill that proposes the establishment of the Texas Geothermal Energy Production Policy Council. What is this?
So um this is a really smart move to help Texas get ahead of the curve, and we are hoping that the TXGEA will actually get to have a seat at this table as well as the trade association in the state. But this really will help have a policy council that will get to have discussion with industry, lawmakers, regulatory body, an ongoing conversation that really gets to work cumulatively and together to make policies that make sense going forward, and just make sure that we're being strategic with how we develop and pass bills to really show the free market that, hey, we're serious about making geothermal the thing here in Texas. It really, I hope that it signals to industry that we're making serious moves to produce and develop and store geothermal energy here, as compared to other states like Nevada or Utah. I know that those are probably our other competitors, California as well.
Okay. Okay, so there's more bills. So we have Bill HB 3778.
Mhm.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about this bill. And this is in regards to geothermal energy being defined as a dispatchable resource. So I thought that was interesting. Um, so when we say dispatchable, I'm assuming we're saying that the source can be turned on or off and it can be adjusted on demand. But how does this definition help make geothermal energy more economically viable? Maybe it doesn't. So is that a fair question to ask?
So this bill is actually really interesting to me. Representative Louderback is the author of this bill, and he is a freshman member, and I'm I really like this bill, and I really like him as a member. His staff is fantastic, and so this is such a forward-thinking bill, very innovative to me because it is saying that geothermal. A lot of the questions that we get all the time is that, oh, geothermal is just another green form of energy. It's a renewable, but I like to call it a perpetual form of energy, right? It's super hot rock. It's shallow rock too sometimes, I guess. I don't know. I'm learning all the different technologies and how we get it out of the ground, but if the heat of the earth goes out, I don't think anyone's really going to we're not going to really care about that, right? Hopefully. But this type of legislation is really important to define this because then it really opens up the pathways for different types of funding opportunities. And that's always kind of the burden of success is what I'm starting to see is the access to capital that a lot of our innovators kind of run into. And so this will help remove that access to capital if we can define this as a dispatchable, steady baseload form of energy. I think it's a really big mark of success if this bill does come into statute without any issue. Because if we can make geothermal a dispatchable resource, then it's up there with nuclear, it's up there with thermal assets, it's up there with coal. So it really will help set us aside and apart from our I guess our green rhetoric that we get told all the time by people that they're just misinformed at this time, and that's okay. It takes time to scale up your industry and work through in your advocacy pieces. But this is a huge strategic win for our industry, and we're a big fan of this bill.
So I just want to ask a question.
Yeah,
When you
go
put
for
a
it.
bill through the Texas legislature, does it take essentially one session for it to be heard and for decisions to be made on it, or is it sometimes ongoing for multiple sessions, multiple
So
years?
there's over 10,000 pieces of legislation filed for 140 days, and the legislative process gets bogged down really, really quickly. I think less than like 8% of 10,000 bills will actually get signed into law because also our governor has a line item veto.
Okay.
Um, and there's two routes that your bills can take. They can, on the House side, they can go to calendars where you're hoping that, the members don't just like brutally kill everything. Or you can try local and consent where nothing gets contested and but if your bill gets contested, then it's gone too. And so it's a very long and tedious process, but we're lawmakers for the past couple of sessions following Winter Storm Uri have had a very, very astute mind for energy development, dispatchability, deployment, even energy efficiency as well. And so they're very mindful of those types of bills. And so I've seen a lot of energy legislation not have any problems. That doesn't mean that they don't have problems in committee or floor amendments or being changed, but they're generally not. They're kind of insulated and they're not being quote unquote killed, if you will, like other areas of legislation are. So I'm very fortunate that I don't worry about property tax legislation anymore or, a member's whole entire docket anymore. I'm just focused on what we worry about within geothermal now.
Okay, that's
But
good.
it's a long process. It's a long 140 days, and I think we have like 68. The legislative session will end June 2nd, and then it goes to conference for 20 days, and that's kind of the governor's veto period as well.
Okay.
And then bills will start going into effect September 1st.
Wow, it's quick.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So next, I want to dive into um, to discuss any initiatives that would help geothermal developers gain easier access to capital. So you just mentioned the dispatch, defining geothermal energy as dispatchable is one. But what also about the Texas Energy Fund?
Yes, so it's a very timely question and one that we're watching really closely. Um, right now, we're really hopeful that geothermal power generation will gain access to the Texas Energy Fund. Either that may be a specific carve out, like I know that nuclear technology is seeking that currently this session. Or we're even hoping that we can just adjust the megawatt threshold to allow geothermal producers to apply for the Texas Energy Fund instead of a specific funding bracket. But right now, the megawatt threshold is over 100 megawatts, and it'd be nice to see that get lower. But we're in a really delicate part of our session, so the path is not clear. Uh, We're hoping that the momentum can build further, but I can say with confidence that TXGEA has been at that table since the beginning. Last session is when the Texas Energy Fund came into fruition for thermal generators, so your traditional natural gas primarily. And so we've been working on bringing, fact-based advocacy, industry expertise, academic voices, and regardless of how the final language takes shape this session, we'll be ready to work through the interim with the interim hearings, with the policy work groups, engaging members, engaging new members that come in, staff changes, and then we'll be ready to hit the legislative session in 2027 ground running again. So we're optimistic, of course, but we're always thinking of long game strategy as well.
Okay, so I'm going to turn now. I want to talk a little bit about the lithium market. I know this is a turn from the geothermal market, but when we last spoke, you had mentioned to me that there was a recent Texas Supreme Court hearing that was in regards to the ownership of produced water from oil and gas wells and who owns this. And I know lithium is a really hot topic here in Texas and our neighboring states. So I thought this could be an interesting topic to discuss. So could you share a little bit about the Texas Supreme Court hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't that such a fascinating
It
case,
is.
the cactus water versus cog? Um, it really signals to me kind of a broader shift in how we're thinking of byproducts, mineral rights, and the resource value of those produced resources. We used to think that there wasn't a lot in it, but it helps you kind of think of innovation as well and how quickly things are changing for what we're coming up with and how we can lead sustainably. So that Texas Supreme Court review, and they haven't issued their opinion yet on it, so I'm really curious to see. I don't know when it's coming up, like when it has to be out, but they haven't done it yet. The review of the produced water ownership isn't just about oil and gas either. It's about kind of redefining what's considered waste versus opportunity, which I think is interesting to think of it like that. With critical minerals like lithium now in focus, the outcome case could be reshaped on how investment landscape for water treatment and extraction and resource recovery has changed for a very long time. From TexGEA's perspective, not that we have any skin in the game on this, but it's a signal that regulatory and legal framework in Texas is evolving really quickly, and that geothermal has a seat at the table on that conversation. Our industry is leading that subsurface innovation. Um, legal clarity like this really helps to open the door for technologies and innovation, especially like lithium extraction from geothermal brine. So it just enhances our water reuse strategies. I think of closed loop geothermal as well. So I don't know what we're going to come up with next, but as we continue with to advocate for those forward-looking policies, this case will underscore why it's so important to modernize definitions and frameworks and why we're not just powering the grid. We're part of a broader innovative ecosystem that touches everything, critical minerals to sustainable water use. And I think it's amazing.
I echo that. I'm excited for what's to come in the lithium space, especially when it's combined with geothermal.
Well, it's really great, but I'm also grateful that we have justices on our Supreme Court that really look at things with a really broad lens. And I mean, I sent you the hearing as well, and just kind of the questions that they ask. I mean, they're advocates for private property rights, but they're also advocates for business growth in Texas. And so it's going to be really interesting to get back all the opinions on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And for our listeners, I can also share the link to um, the hearing if anyone is interested.
Yeah, if you're
I,
bored.
I watched it. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
You
it brings
watched
up a
it.
lot of great questions that
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Friday night activity. Um, okay, so what will TXGEA focus on once the legislative session ends in June? So we're about 84 days into the session. So you mentioned it ends on June 2nd. What will your focus be after June?
Absolutely. So as session winds down, really, our work is just beginning. And that makes me really excited because we'll be very deeply involved in the rulemaking process. So after the legislature passes the laws, now the Railroad Commission and the Public Utility Commission get to take that and digest those. They get to interpret how it is and apply the laws, and then you never know what ends up in a Supreme Court hearing and how those laws are being applied. So our work will just start, and like I said, we'll be heavily involved in the rulemaking process to make sure those policies that were passed are actually working on the ground and best serving our members. At the same time, we're focused on supporting our members, growing the geothermal community, continuing to tell the story that geothermal is reliable, dispatchable, economically feasible, and we're ready to scale in Texas. It's just such an exciting moment. We're here to keep that momentum going.
Wonderful. Okay, well, my last question for you today is how can companies and individuals get involved with TextGEA?
Thank you so much for letting me have this opportunity just to kind of get on my little geothermal soapbox here as a trade association, as the only trade association in Texas for Texans and developers here. But getting involved with TexGEA is easy, and we would love to be connected, even just to visit with you and to see if membership's the right fit. We have a lot of different membership tiers. And you can reach to me directly. My email is Jade, Jade, at texgea.org, or you can visit us on the web at texgea.org. We're actively always growing our membership base. I'm always focused on how can I create value for our member companies, our member individuals. We have people from the biggest developers to your brand new consultant students. We welcome everybody, whether you're brand new to this space and you're just getting your feet wet, or you're a major power player, a serious developer. And we really like to bring in that synergy of everybody. We raise all boats. We are industry development agnostic, but we want to see everybody be successful in this state, and that's really what we like to do.
Well, Jade, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us on this episode of Geothermal Unleashed. I hope today's discussion has sparked new insights and deepened your understanding of the geothermal industry's incredible potential. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and let's continue working together to unleash the full potential of geothermal. Thank you.